Good morning, everybody. Dear international partners, dear colleagues, dear friends of the university from all over the world. It is my great pleasure to welcome you to our International Week 2021. My name is Katalin Taylor. I am head of the Center for International Relations, and this is my colleague, Jeffrey Vaughan, part of the international team, Director of Studies. The two of us are here to moderate this three-day online event. Organizing the International Days has always been a big challenge for us. This year, a little bit stressful, but it was fun and pleasure. And it's a shame that we won't be able to shake hands with you or to meet you in person. However, I am glad that you are here. This morning we've checked and we had about 120 participants, so it's great. And I hope at the end of this three-day event, you will be able to take home some inspiring new thoughts. As Lindsay has said, we have presenters from lots of different countries, from the USA to Australia. And our first presenter is from Portugal, but he's actually from the UK. And he's Jeff's good friend. So I would like to ask you, Jeff, to introduce Mr. Martin Heslop. Welcome, Martin.
Thank you. Good morning.
Thank you very much, Kati. Thank you for that. It's my pleasure to introduce Mr. Martin Heslop. Martin has been a teacher of English as a foreign language since graduating from Durham University with a first in modern languages back in 1994. And having worked in many European countries, he has settled to live and work in Braga, which is in northern Portugal, since 2005. Not only is Martin one of the most intelligent and inspiring teachers I know, he also happens to be my best friend. Martin and I met at school when we were teenagers, and we've remained best mates ever since. I know that Martin will bring his humanity and his modesty to his talk that he does in his life. It's my absolute pleasure to welcome you, Martin, to our International Week. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jeff. Thank you for your kind words. Good morning, everybody. It's lovely to be here. Yes, I'd like to get started, please, by drawing attention to the topic of my talk, which is Get It Together. And what I'd like to do first is to explain what I mean by that, by getting it together. What I really mean is students working in pairs or in groups. But the question is, what do we do when we get our students together in pairs? Why do we do this? Well, the obvious one would be the traditional, what we call communicative activities, such as discussions, role plays, and my particular area of interest is the information gap activities, where you divide students into two groups of A and B. They have different information, which they then get together to exchange. I'd also like to include a couple of other things, which are the joint preparation for communicative tasks. I'll talk more about that later. And also something I like to do is to ask my learners to talk together about their answers to some maybe even grammar, vocabulary exercises, and also maybe answers to comprehension exercises to give them the opportunity to check information before doing feedback as a full class. Also, what I'd like to talk about today is why do we do this? What beliefs about the acquisition of new language underlie the extensive use of group work in the second language classroom? So I'm just going to do a very, very brief map of my talk. It's very simple. I'm going to talk about some theories, some SLA theories, first of all, and then I'm going to move on to some practical ideas, which I use with my students. And then there will be time for some questions at the end, moderated by Jeff and his colleagues at the university. Okay, so can I just share a screen with you to show you some of the areas that I'm going to talk about? Okay. All right, if you'll just give me a moment to hide some controls. There we go, so everyone can see that clearly. Okay, right, so these are some of the areas, these are some of the terms taken from second language acquisition, SLA research, that I'm going to focus on in the first part of my talk. I'm just going to leave those there for a moment for you to have a quick look through. I'm sure you will be familiar with many of those. If not, well, don't worry, I'm going to approach them one by one and explain what they are and connect them to why they're important for using group work. Okay, so the first one I'd like to talk about is this term interlanguage. So what exactly is interlanguage? I see it as a learner's current version of the target language. If you imagine it as a continuum from knowing nothing about the target language right up to the other end of the continuum, which is mastery of the language, native-like mastery, a learner will be at a particular point on that continuum at a particular time. By its very nature, interlanguage is constantly evolving, and is also inconsistent. But the most important thing about it is that interlanguage is individual, and that's something that I feel is can be exploited in the group work interaction. All learners as individuals have their own interlanguage, and different learners will be more or less confident about different parts of this. What I'm saying is that in a group, a pair, a small group, everyone is bringing something to the table. There may be a learner who's more confident about certain areas of grammar. There may be others that have better vocabulary knowledge to be able to complete the task. And even at higher levels, there may be learners who have a better appreciation of appropriacy, so that the right language to complete that task. So, I mean, I think this connects to what was said earlier about collaboration. So I'm a great believer in collaboration in the classroom. And as I say, everybody has something to contribute. The next area I'd like to talk about is comprehensible input. Now, I don't want to go into theories too deeply, but I think it's impossible to talk about second language acquisition without mentioning Stephen Krashen, and this is one of his terms. So according to Krashen, comprehensibility of the input is a vital condition for language acquisition to take place. Let me just explain the I+1. The I being interlanguage, so a learner's level of language, and the +1 is a level just a little bit beyond that. Okay, so if we can provide input which is just a little bit more difficult, a little bit beyond the things that learners know, but is still comprehensible, then that's ideal. I think that there is a greater likelihood that input from other learners will be comprehensible because by its very nature, it's going to be somewhat simplified. So that will help learners to understand each other. Okay. The next area I'd like to explore is the negotiation of meaning, which is the interactive work carried out by speakers. And I mean all speakers, not just learners. So carried out by any speaker when there is a misunderstanding or indeed a lack of understanding. it may include the following. It may include paraphrasing. For example, you might say to someone, so what you're saying is, and then you paraphrase what they've said just to check the understanding. You may repeat what people say. At 3 o'clock, did you say at 3 o'clock? So just repeating it to clarify, to make sure. And any forms of clarification, so, even in like a transactional thing, like which cafe exactly did you mean? Yeah, did you mean the one on the corner or the one, you see? So that's what I mean by asking for clarification. According to some researchers, the negotiation of meaning does actually promote acquisition. Also, it keeps the interaction going. It means that there's no communication breakdown. Just because if you don't understand something, you don't just say, "Oh, okay, conversation over." It keeps the interaction going and provides chances for more input to come in. There is a dispute, however, about whether negotiation of meaning necessarily means that learners are paying attention to form. For example, teachers quite often use what's called the recast. In other words, like it's correction, sort of disguised, if you like, as interaction. Let me give you an example. Imagine a student says something like, "Oh, I see a good film last night." And the teacher might say, "Oh, you saw a good film last night." So you see there's the correction in there. But it's quite possible that the learner may pay no attention to that and come back with, yes, I see Star Wars. So it went completely unnoticed because it was hidden by the communication. However, we must travel hopefully, and we just have to hope that learners will notice at some point when they're ready to notice. But of course, there are other ways of making these correct versions of language more salient, and we will be coming back to that later. Right, now, to be more specific about forms rather than meaning, there is such a thing as negotiation of form, which is learners working on language that is necessary to complete a task before the task is started. Okay, so it's a planning stage, if you like a pre-task. For example, imagine you're having an activity where learners are planning interviews. Obviously, they'd be working on the questions involved and thinking about the correct language forms for making those questions before actually not spontaneously asking them. Maybe asking too much for that to be spontaneous. So they need that little bit of planning time. Okay. I'd also like to talk about scaffolding. Now, scaffolding is a term used in some educational approaches, and it refers to the support provided by teachers or instructors, tutors, etc. But in some SLA research, the term collective scaffolding has been used. And of course, what it means is learners supporting each other. It has been said that individually, learners may be novices, but collectively, they can be experts, which I think is a very, very positive thing to say. I do like that quote. Now, of course, we must remember this doesn't in any way negate the role of teachers in all of this. Teachers need to set up activities, provide the materials, provide the opportunities for the interaction, and may, of course, need to provide some input before they're providing some of the relevant language that's necessary to use in the task. During the task, teachers, of course, have to monitor, do some research, find out what the difficulties are, what the positive points are, and also afterwards, essentially, to provide some feedback. And this is when I was talking about making things more salient at that point in the feedback. For example, afterwards, it would be possible for the teacher or to provide a demonstration of the task, their own version, or to provide like another native speaker or more accurate version of the task, and get students to pay attention to the language that is used in that, before then giving the learners an opportunity to repeat the task. For example, if you do the same task but with a different partner, essentially it's a different task, but using the same language. That's something obviously from the task-based approach, which is very positive. Now let's talk about the role of output. We've talked about input, which is of course what excuse me, what the learners hear, but what about the production, what learners produce? Now, obviously, a lot of learners like participating, they like producing language. It's something that makes them feel that they're making progress, of course, and we must encourage it. And if you use the pair or group work setup, we can actually individual learners can devote more time to producing language. I mean, just do the maths, as they say. I'm very fortunate in having small classes, maximum 16. But even if you think in a lesson, 16 learners, like just interacting with the teacher, it gives them relatively little time to interact. And also, there's the danger that certain learners might dominate that forum. Other benefits are that when using language, learners can actually notice certain gaps in their knowledge. I think it's very valuable indeed, to know what you don't know, yeah? So you can build on that, work on that. Also, it gives learners opportunities to test their hypotheses about language. For example, they may think like, oh, I've learnt this word, I think I know that, I'm going to use it. And if it works, if it communicates what they're hoping to communicate, excellent. Yeah? If not, okay, I'm going to have to reevaluate that. Now, of course, this involves an element of risk-taking. And once again, it's very much the teacher's role to provide an environment where risk-taking is encouraged and there's no fear of making mistakes. Also, in order to produce language, learners have to make more effort. So they may have to stretch themselves beyond their current level of interlanguage. When we talk about productive and receptive skills, obviously our receptive skills are invariably superior to our productive skills. We can always understand more than we can produce in a second language, but perhaps by encouraging more output, learners can try and bring their levels of productive skills closer to those of the receptive skills. Also, I think another way of using output is to get learners to actually talk about language. I mentioned earlier doing feedback together with the learners on, say, like homework or class exercises, but the teacher needs to provide the tools to be able to do that. I mean, in the days when we used to do lessons actually in a classroom, okay, it's been a while, the temptation would be for one student to show their book to the next person next to them, go, right, those are my answers. But obviously on Zoom, that's not possible. So it's good that learners have to actually talk about it. But when I say provide the tools, I mean, teach them the meta language to be able to do it, saying, so, oh, what did you put for number 2? Yeah, what have you got for number 3? Yeah, oh, I put this. Oh, did you? You know, oh, I put something else, you know. And it's like, oh, I'm not sure. Just those little things that we need to complete that task. It would come naturally in your first language, but in a second language, perhaps those need to be taught. Okay. The final thing I'd like to talk about is the effective filter. This is Krashen again, of course. The effective filter, it describes this situation. If a learner feels afraid or embarrassed, their effective filter is said to be high or up, yeah? And it acts as a barrier to learning. Yeah? So the stress and embarrassment means that you don't learn. So the idea is to lower the effective filter in class. Okay? Again, teacher's role, but also I feel that by using group work or pair work, it's much less stressful than open class performance. You know? For example, I mean, I have many, I have certain parents who at parents' meetings say, "Oh, my daughter's very, very shy. You know, please just push her. You know, ask her questions. You know, get her to part." I'm thinking, that's about the last thing I need to be doing. So I feel that in a small group, people are much more likely to take those risks I was talking about, but also more likely to ask for help and to admit that they don't know something and need some help from their colleagues. So once again, you know, as a teacher, we have to foster this collaborative environment, encourage people to share what they know, to be positive, to focus on what they know, and to ask for help when they don't know something, and from everybody, not just from the teacher. Okay, so those are all of the second language acquisition terms that I wanted to cover. Please feel free to ask me about any of those later in the question session, but now I'm going to move on to the practical part. Okay, I'm going to share a few ideas with you. I'm going to start with a speaking activity, well, of course, as you would expect, but then I'm going to move on to some other skills. I apply the get it together principle to all areas of language learning, not just activities that are explicitly speaking activities, but of course they all involve communication and using language to complete a task. Right. So I'm going to start with a speaking activity. Okay. Now, as I've talked about before, I mentioned the information gap. Okay. So we have Group A and Group B, Student A and Student B. And the idea is that we give them different information, which they then have to share. Yeah? Hence the information gap. One way of doing this is to use some videos. I have found some that I don't know if you're familiar with the Specsavers adverts. Yeah, you may have seen them on Specsavers. It's a British opticians, a chain of opticians selling glasses. And these adverts are very short and very visual, and they all show people in situations where wearing glasses would have been very advantageous. They get themselves into difficult situations because they don't have glasses or the right glasses. And the slogan is, they should have gone to Specsavers. And they are amusing, and above all, they are short and very visual, so ideal for this situation. Let me explain my classroom procedure in class. Yeah, because one day we will be back there. Yeah, and then I'll talk about how we can do this on Zoom or any other platform that we use. So in class, I would show these short videos on the screen at the front of the class. Group A will be sitting with their backs to the screen, so they can't see what's happening. They can maybe hear, but there's not much speaking in them. There's often just music and sound effects. Yeah? So they can't see. Group B will be looking at the screen, making notes about what they can see. And then you show a couple of adverts, because they're very short, show a couple. And then they swap positions so that B can't see, A are looking at the screen. And then you show two different adverts. Yeah, there are plenty of them. And then what I would do is, we need that planning stage. So I'd get all the A's together again in pairs to say, okay, so what did we see? And maybe prepare, getting ready to describe their adverts. B's are doing the same, but then we get an A and a B together and they describe the adverts to each other. Finally, of course, we'd then watch them together and give some feedback on whether that was what they expected. Yeah, so when the B's are watching A's adverts, it's like, I didn't think it would be like that. Okay. Now, obviously on Zoom, it's simpler than that. We don't have to move people around. All we need to do is provide different links to the YouTube videos for the different students. Okay? So in the chat box, okay, all right, A's, look at this one and this one. These are your links, click on those. B's, these are your links, click on those. Okay. Now, And then in breakout rooms, the A's can watch their videos together, make their notes together. B's are doing the same. And then the teacher brings them back, reconfigures the groups with an A and a B, and do it just like in class before we all come back together and we can all watch the videos on the screen before going back into breakout rooms for a bit of feedback on was it what they expected. Okay, can I just give you a little tip? Something that I learned, well, I say something I learned, I've learned about a million things about using Zoom in the last year. Something that I learned last year was that if we do have information for A and information for B that we want to keep secret. See, I teach quite a lot of teenagers, and they're always looking for a bit of a shortcut, so they may actually try and get hold of B's information, which if they're A. So what you can do is decide who's B, put them in the waiting room, share your information with the A's in the chat box, and then bring the B's back in. They won't be able to see what's in the chat box. And then you send the A's into the waiting room, and then share your information with the B's. Make sure they've all got that before bringing the A's back and starting your activity. It does take a little bit of time, but it means that people have definitely got information that is secret and particular to their group. Okay, so that's how to do it on Zoom. Okay, so let's move on to, now this is absolutely one of my favorite activities, and I do this all the time. It's vocab revision, but the AB vocab revision. For example, if we have a text that we've read together in class, a listening text, it could be a reading text that we've done, and there's some good vocab in it. In the next lesson, I try to bring that back just to consolidate that vocab. For example, I'm just going to show you this. I'm sorry, this is on a little scrap of paper, which I used back in the days when we were face-to-face. I don't know if you can see that very well, but this is something for B. These are some words that come from a text, okay? And these are the words for A, okay? And what I used to do was to photocopy that and distribute them to group A. They work together, so, okay, how can we explain these to the other group? So they have that little bit of preparation time again that I was talking about. B's are doing the same thing with their group. And then you get an A and a B together, and they try to make each other say their words. But of course, this is something that it takes time to, you need to demonstrate this if you haven't done it before. Provide the sort of language that's necessary, like, okay, well, this word, it's the opposite of, or it's a person who, and things like that. So you do need to provide some input, particularly at the lower levels. There are many other things you can do with that as well, not just revision from vocab there. I've got this book here of crosswords, Peter Watson Jones crosswords. And I thought, oh, crosswords, we've got one grid, so that's the same for everybody. We've got clues going across, clues going down. Oh, why not give all the clues across to group A, all the clues going down to group B, and then they can get it together. So the A's work together, now in their breakout rooms, of course.
Martin, please unmute yourself. Sorry.
Yeah, sure. Somebody interrupted there. I muted them, and I'm not sure. Yeah. Okay. Sorry. So yes, the A's would work together on the across ones, and of course, then the teacher provides the answers. They do actually need the correct answers, but when they get it together, they of course, they have clues, of course, but very often those clues may not be enough for B to get their answers, so they have to add to it. and elaborate and give further examples. But even if they don't, there's still that opportunity for that negotiation of meaning. They're asking people to repeat, asking people to clarify things. Yeah? So we can do the crosswords, but also you can use it for vocab revision from your course book. Back in January, after the break, when my students were obviously a little bit rusty after a couple of weeks off for Christmas, we went back to some of our previous units. I provided some examples from the first unit. I chose some words, and again, I provided examples of language of how to actually explain words. Yeah. So, what B, now beginning with B, of course, what B is an object used for blah, blah, blah. Okay. And then you give group A a couple of units of the course book, right? You've got units 2 and 3. And then group B, you say, right, you've got units 3 and 4. Choose the words you want, write some, get some definitions ready. And then, of course, A and B together, make them say those words. So you've got vocab revision. Okay, right, just a couple more things quickly. The next one is a listening activity, and it's based on a song. This song is a song by the Red Hot Chili Peppers. I'm sorry there's not time to listen to it, but never mind. This is a way of dividing the work between A and B and providing the opportunity to communicate. Let me share this screen with you. So basically, I got hold of the lyrics of this song, Under the Bridge, and what I did was I deleted some of them, divided the lines A and B, and in brackets, I've told them how many words they're looking for. The reason I've done it like this is to make it more manageable. It's actually very difficult to write down all the words of the song. Yeah? So I've given them some help, but also because it's A and B, A listens to that first line, and while they're writing, well, you've got the next line, but they don't have to worry about that. B's doing that one, okay? So there's a bit more time to do it. And then, of course, it provides the opportunity for some communication later. We play the song again, listen again. The A's and B's can work together. A's can say, well, I got this, but I missed that word. And the B's go, I think it's, yeah. So they can help each other to complete the lyrics. It's just a way of making a song more manageable. Now, of course, you can do that with any song you like, but it must be a song with clear lyrics, because they are being asked to write them all down. Okay. Time for a reading activity, very briefly. This one is a classic. This is multiple choice. Now, this activity, I call it multiple choice, but not yet. Okay, so let me share a screen with you again. All right, now this text is very small, but don't worry, because you don't need to be able to read it. Okay, hold on a moment. Okay. So here we go. This is the text. It actually comes from Proficiency, Cambridge Proficiency. So that's the text, but then these are the multiple choice questions. As you can see, what I've done is I've actually taken away the ABCD answers. So what I asked the learners to do is first individually, maybe at home, to read the text and try and find the answers in their own words. And then in pairs or small groups, compare their answers. What are in their own words again? Do they agree about where the information is in the text? What are the answers? And then, of course, let me see, can you see this? This is the original. You've got your ABCD. So once they've actually thought about it, then they can compare to the Cambridge versions and see if they can come up with the right answer. I did this the other week for some revision with my proficiency class, and they all managed to get the correct answers in this way. Okay, all right. Well, I'm going to stop in a minute, but before I do, what I'd like you to take away from this session is not necessarily the ideas that I've just shown you. What I'd like you to take away is the idea of getting it together, yeah, and apply this principle to all areas of your teaching. The idea, of course, is to make everything as communicative as possible, as collaborative as possible, and giving learners the opportunity to use language for its true purpose, which is, of course, communication. Okay, well, thank you very much. That's all I have to say. I'm going to hand back to the university for questions.
Thank you very much, Martin. I certainly very much enjoyed your talk, and I would be happy to listen to you for another hour. But unfortunately, our time is limited. I'm asking Lindsay if she can see any questions in the chat box.
No, there's no, but if anybody is interested, you can raise your hand and we'll let you ask your question. I really appreciated the very practical tips that you offer, especially in the online uncertainty of today. So thank you. It was really creative. I tend to use this venue or this way of teaching every day. And so I got a lot of good ideas. So thank you.
While people are thinking, I might ask you something. In Hungary, I think with group works and pair works, often the problem is that students lack confidence. And when the teacher is not there, standing next to them, they switch back to Hungarian. So I just wanted to ask whether you face this problem in Portugal or what do you do about it?
Absolutely, I do face that, on a daily basis, and it is a difficulty. But I think to address the confidence area, I think the role of the teacher here is to make these activities manageable. I think one of the dangers is that when we talk about a communicative activity, we often just throw the learners in at the deep end and say, okay, right, you're going to talk about this, you're going to talk about that, and just get on with it. But I think the steps that I mentioned only briefly, again, time's been a factor, but the steps I talked about earlier, pre-task is an essential time. You need to put in some groundwork, particularly at lower levels. You really do need to provide a lot of help. You need to demonstrate the task. If only to take away from the stress of like, oh, what are we supposed to be doing here? If learners can actually see what they're supposed to be doing, then they're going to have more processing power to focus on the language element. So the language element as well, it's essential to focus on that before the task. As I say, don't throw them in at the deep end. You need to provide some of the vocabulary that's necessary, if certain language structures are necessary. And then that pre-task bit can help. Also, I've talked about the task repetition. If learners do a task and don't necessarily do it that well, because first time it may not happen, you can then provide feedback on that task, and they can think about like the way they perhaps should have expressed things. And then if they get another opportunity, that will give them more confidence, because the second time they did it, they think like, oh yeah, that went well. I think we've all done it when using a second language. I know if I have to make I've been here in Portugal for a long time, but learning Portuguese as an older person has not necessarily been that easy. So if I have to make a phone call or something, I kind of go through it in my head before. It's like, oh, what am I going to say? I plan it out a bit. And I also think, well, what are they likely to say to me? What do I do if they say this? What do I do if they say that? And in class, the first task is often like a chance for learners to rehearse, if you like, so that when they do it a second time, they feel better about it. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know if that helps.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah,
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, so we have a question from Nikki from the UK. And just 1 second, and I'll let you ask your question.
Hello, Nikki.
You have to allow us to unmute you. one more time.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Oh, lovely.
Absolutely,
Oh, thank
Nikki.
you
Hello.
so much, Martin. Really enjoyed listening to everything you said. I was particularly interested to just ask about what you see in terms of the difference between the spoken work that you do and the written work your students need to do. And particularly in terms of stress levels and anxiety, do you see any particular difference between their approach to doing the oral activities and written work that you need to do as well?
I think that's very dependent on individual students and the areas they feel more confident about. I mean, I certainly have learners who absolutely love speaking, and given any opportunity to speak, they'll get stuck in straight away. They may not be the most accurate speakers in the world, but they don't really mind. They just try and communicate a message. But at the same time, if you ask those people to complete a piece of written work, that's really not their area. Whereas there are other students who may be significantly quieter in class, but often produce some very high quality written work because they like having that time to plan, that time to get things right. I think to go back to what Katy was saying about confidence. That's one of the problems with the spoken language, is the kind of spontaneous processing. It's got to come out now, and people often feel that they can't do that. Whereas with the writing, having the time, they're more comfortable with that.
And has that, as your the teaching over Zoom, has that had an impact on how you address the written side as well?
The written side, yeah, certainly. I mean, I think one of the advantages of teaching this way is I've done a lot more in the way of collaborative writing. I've used, I mean, I don't know if you use Google Docs. I mean, I'd never heard of a Google Doc this time last year, I'll be honest with you. But now I use them quite a lot and get learners to work together on things. I mean, that's right up to, I mean, I've had proficiency students just like working on a paragraph of an essay, you know, just one paragraph. And working together on that, some of them focusing on the summarizing, some of them focusing on the evaluating. And obviously, because it's collaborative, it can be a bit kind of, you know, lacking in unity, but then that's something you can work on afterwards to, you know, to remold it and bring it together as a piece. But certainly, yeah, the Google Docs is a great way of doing collaborative writing.
Lovely, thank you, Martin. Yes, really positive things from the new technology, aren't there? That we've
well, there are some. I think we have to view it that way. I mean, I think we all know that we're not necessarily, this is not ideal, but there are things which are more positive, as you say. Yeah, thank you, Nikki. Thanks.
Okay, is there any other questions, or anyone else would like to make a comment while we're here?
Okay, so thank you very much, Martin, again for your inspiring thoughts. I think there is another question, so
excellent.
I will ask Lindsay to.
Yes, Lindsay, I can't really hear you, but is that me to ask?
Yes, go ahead.
Oh, thank you, Martin. It was a pleasure to listen to your lecture. Thank you very much. Just returning back to the lack of confidence of I would like to ask if you have any special techniques to encourage your students, to motivate them, or to bring them some kind of confidence.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think as a general point, something I mentioned earlier is fostering that collaborative atmosphere in class. You know, making people realize that they all have something valuable to contribute, and even if their contribution is the fact that they don't know something. Yeah, the fact that they've admitted, like, oh, I don't know that, can you help me? Well, that could be a learning experience, not just for them, but for everybody. Yeah? I mean, they may be the only ones who are brave enough to say they don't know, so everyone else can actually learn from that. What else? I just think being a teacher who's very, very positive, who's very, very encouraging. I mean, I know that's something that I'm sure we all do, but I think we can't praise our students enough, really. You've got a lot of students in the class, and you need to make sure that they all feel supported, and that their contributions are valued at all times. But I also think that there's a certain amount of learner training that goes on here. We can't assume that there was a point that I wanted to make, actually, that sometimes learners are a little bit negative about the idea of talking to, why am I talking to my colleague? Why am I not talking to the teacher? It's the teacher who knows. It's like, well, I think we need to try and, that's why I wanted to talk about some of the theoretical background to what I do today, because I think we need to be informed so that we can inform our students about why we do this. Yeah, I have actually pointed out to my students, well, look, if you just talk to me all the time, then you're not going to talk for very much. Do you want practice? If you want practice, practice with your partners. Yeah? However, I would say that it can be difficult for some students to have that confidence. And whatever we do, however much we encourage, it can be difficult for them. But as I was saying earlier, I do feel that the thing is, you have to make a task manageable. You have to provide language to complete the task. You have not just things that they parrot and repeat. Some things will be, of course, but those are the things that give them confidence, and then they can use some of their own things as well. Even at very, very low levels, it's possible to do this as long as learners have the support. But there has to be that learner training in there as well, in all different aspects. Like, well, why are we doing this? What are the benefits of doing this? And also, as I say, providing language support before, during, and after.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your question.
And for the good idea.
I'm sorry that I'm afraid there is no magic wand here. It would be I'd love to be able to reveal a deep truth about that, but I'm afraid I can't. It's a long process of encouragement and training.
Agree, and thank you again.
Thank you.
Lindsay, no more questions.
Excuse me.
Mm-hmm.
Hello,
Go ahead.
excuse me. Can I ask you something?
Of course.
Okay, yeah. Thank you. Let me introduce myself. My name's Annie. I'm from Indonesia. Okay, Martin. Well, I would like to ask you about the model of teaching, especially in English, by online. As we know that sometimes we have a trouble with the connections, and in context to the role of output that you have teach us, especially with the point of role of output, and especially with the interaction between learners and teachers. How can we interact with the learners or students in this context while we use online? As you know that we, especially in Indonesia, we have lots of trouble with the connection because say our students are in remote areas, sometimes like that, in many islands, So can you give us, give me your suggestions how to teach them smoothly? Okay, thank you very much, Martin.
Okay, well, Emmy, thank you very much for your question.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I think when you have technology problems like that, there are some things that you can do with a bad connection. The first one is, I know it's not ideal, but if learners switch their cameras off, that uses less bandwidth. So if you don't have a camera on, then you're likely to have a better connection. Also, I think that when we have trouble with, for example, especially in the early stages of Zoom, a lot of our, sorry, I keep mentioning Zoom because that's what I use. I'm not advertising them. We had a lot of trouble with learners who had difficulty with sound. And often what you can do is, I mean, the chat box is invaluable for this. Yeah, learners are still able to make contributions like through the chat box. Yeah, again, not ideal, but it can be done. It is difficult when people drop in and out because, of course, they lose what's in the chat box. Yeah, and if you've sent some material in the chat box, they may lose the connection to that material as well. So it is very, very difficult to do this with poor connections. But as I say, camera off, use the chat box. Instead, in the absence of the ability to use audio, that can help. It's not an ideal substitute, but it's a way of making sure that people are still involved, still participating in some way, so they do feel connected to the lesson and the other learners and the teacher, of course. Okay, I hope that helps, Emmy. I'm sorry, I don't really. I'm not sure that I have the technical expertise to be able to answer your question fully, but that's what I've found anyway.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Martin.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much,
you.
Martin, and thank you very much also for the questions. I wish we had more time, but unfortunately we have to move on. Now we'll have a short break of 5 minutes with some classical music, so please stay with us. The music will be played by teachers of the music department of the university, and we'll be back at about 10:30 with the next session. Thank you.
Okay.
Yes, go ahead.
Hello. Could I just before I go? I'm afraid I have to go in a minute. I've got a busy day ahead. But can I just say thank you to everybody for their questions. Thank you to everybody for your attention. And finally, great thanks to Jeff and to his colleagues at the university for inviting me here to talk today. It's been a great pleasure. So thank you, everybody. Goodbye and stay safe. Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you, Martin.
Bye.
Bye-bye.